What's up, y'all? Serge here. I'm a developer experience engineer at Sentry, and in this video, we're going to be talking about session replay, how to instrument it inside your Next.js application, configuration and sampling options, and what it looks like in Sentry. Session replay is a video-like reproduction of all the interaction that a user is taking on your application. It has minimal impact on your front-end performance, and it's a really good way to understand what a user did to get that error, or just to observe how they're interacting with your applications. We use an open source technology called RRWeb, as well as some custom mutation observers for interactions like clicks and scrolls. Let's take a look at what it looks like in code. Because session replay is client-side only, the only configuration that you need to update is your instrumentation client.ts file. Inside your integrations, make sure you have a session replay integration and two sample rates, one for session replay sample rate and one for replays on error sample rate. Let me quickly show you how this works. So on every single session, we first check for the session sample rates. If the sample rate is greater than 0, we check session sampling, and if it's not sampled, we fall back to the error sample rate. If it is sampled, we start the recording, and then we flush it to Sentry. Now, if you don't have a sample rate set, we fall back to the error sample rates, and if it's greater than 0, we start buffering, we wait for the error. If it happens, we check the sample rate, and if it's sampled, we flush it, and we kind of restart this whole process. In development, you can keep these at 100%, but keep an eye out on your quota to make sure that you're not missing important context for how your users are interacting with your application. With replay set up, let's take a look at what it looks like in Sentry. First, we're going to start a new session by opening up a new browser and go into localhost, Sentry sample page. We'll go ahead and throw a sample error and end the session. To view replays inside Sentry, you're going to head over to Explore and go to Replays. Here, you'll see a list of all the replays that are happening in your application. Make sure you have the right application and the right time frame set up so you can see them. Here's a replay from the session that just happened. The live indicator is there because we want to make sure that we're keeping track of the whole session. So if I reopen that tab and go ahead and interact with it, it's actually going to be part of the same session because we're using session storage. You can learn more about user sessions in our documentation. Now, if I go ahead and click it, you'll see a video-like reproduction of all the things that were happening. So you can scrub through it. You'll get an AI summary of all of the actions and all of the things that happened within this session. You can take a look at the console, the logs, network requests, and other things as you build up more context about this user's interaction. Now, notice how it says anonymous user, as well as all of the content on this page is masked. We take privacy really seriously, and so by default, we mask everything. This is where we can extend the configuration. So if we go back to our instrumentation, we can add options like unmask, and we can pass it any CSS selector. So in this case, it's a data attribute that's data Sentry unmask. And then we can also enable default PII to be able to see IP addresses. Now set that to true. We're going to go back to the example page. And on the button, I'm going to add a unmask. And another thing we can do is we can actually pass it a data Sentry component attribute, which will show up in replays, and then you'll be able to filter down by specific components that you want to track. If you are using Webpack, there's an option called React Component Annotation that you can enable, and then components will be auto-instrumented for you. With TurboPack, we don't have access to it, but you can still annotate components that are most important to you. One more thing I'd like to mention is if you have an application that has user authentication, one more thing we can do is add Sentry.setUser API to give even more context to your replays. In order to do that, anywhere on the client that you keep track of your user sessions, in my case, it'll be the authentication provider. You can import Sentry, and anytime you have a user session, use the Sentry.setUser API and pass it all the details for that user. Now, if we load up our application one more time, and I have basic cookie authentication here, but we're going to log in, and we're going to head back to the example page. And we're going to throw a sample error. We're going to close this window and take a look at Sentry. Now you have a replay that is identified by that user that was using it, and it helps understand which users are facing which errors. And because we've set up the masking configuration, you can see that at the part where we're on the Sentry example page, the sample error rates button actually shows the text. As well as looking at the breadcrumbs, you can see the user click interaction. And here it shows that React component name that we gave it when we were annotating it. This way, it's really easy to add it to your search filter and track any components that are part of critical experiences in your application and see how users are experiencing those errors. Session replay also works inside canvases. Just keep in mind that there is no PII scrubbing inside those. And if you're building a 3D game or using WebGL or WebGPU, you can also get a sense of how users are interacting with your application. Check out our docs for any additional configuration and let us know if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.